Hello, my darlings. Today I'm taking another look at a different theory. This one is put together by Ryan Challenor, and it's a study take on Bigfoot cryptid hominids. It's one that he feels David Paulides seems to think is most likely. Part 1. General intro about these creatures. After 2 years of steady research, I think the evidence is clearly weighed to large hominid creatures that share common ancestry with Homo sapiens. They are sophisticated in their own way, a way that is separate from humans and hard to imagine. They don't have written language, but they have an immaculate focus on the present. They are more intuitive than humans, and more sensitive to emotions and basic animal behaviors and intentions. They can read people, like very observant people can, but from far distances with their good eyesight. They've learned to look for people carrying firearms, or perhaps can either smell gunpowder or the remnant particles of previous charges on the weapons. The way they have learned to watch is the same way our ancestors were said to have learned when they migrated from living in forests down to living on the plains. They stood in the tree line for many hours waiting for their prey. They have all the time in the world to lay low, creep around, and think for a good time to strike. Why didn't they turn into Homo sapiens? Because they dwelled in those reclusive mountain settings. Back then, the granite itself was more radioactive, affecting only the dwellers in those areas. This radiation was ionizing to their cell division, and they became a very separate being. I bet the creatures themselves get to be old and gray because they don't consume needless calories and get plenty of fresh air and exercise. They have learned to eat almost anything. Part 2. How a textbook missing 411 abduction occurs. Fairly likely explanation for the disappearances. The people come into the deep sections of the park relatively infrequently, and even less often when there is weather, and even less so when a potential target is walking in an area suitable for extraction. And even less when the target wanders away from the others in their party. And even less when the target seems like they aren't paying attention to their hike at the moment. A lot of factors have to hit for the creature to get the right setup. Many go missing in boulder fields because they're perfect to conceal their visibility and audibility. Streams and rivers are loud and conceal their footsteps, and often have a concealed tree line. The animals have evolved to be more sensitive to what the weather is going to do. They know when a storm is about to come and wash everything away. David alludes to this all the time. The creature ducks and pretends to be another boulder in the cliff face, and they wait for the perfect time, and they dash. They stalk the family until one of them lags behind, and the rest of them look the other way for a second. They grab them quickly, clean off their feet, covering their mouths. They hop onto the boulders like stepping stones, then head uphill, while urban humans are less likely to pursue them. Many who disappear but do later survive cannot remember much of what happened because they have minor brain damage. The creature covers their respiration and they have become unconscious from lack of oxygen, and often not remembering what initially happened. Several survivors, once they were found, said they do remember suddenly being whisked upward, elevated 10+ feet or so, that they were smashing into branches, scratching their face. Then the weather sets in, washing away footprints and scent so they are not tracked. I actually fainted myself 2 days in cryotherapy from ducking far lower than I was supposed to in the cold tube, and I didn't breathe enough oxygen versus nitrogen. I went from awake and talking and listening to music to passed out in a second. I didn't even realize it. When I came to, the tech had to convince me that I went out at all. I didn't believe her until I thought about it for about an hour. When your brain goes to sleep from lack of oxygen, it's brain damage that it can affect, creating new memories, especially when other body functions take priority. It's also possible that the acute shock of seeing the creature stimulates so many stress chemicals that memory creation also falls out of priority for the body. The body and brain is focused on struggling and running to get away. If you are trying to physically get away, are extremely terrified, and you can't breathe or see, it's quite possible that your memory goes out temporarily. Once the creature has the person captive, they goof around with them like a pet, sometimes taking off their clothes or redressing them if they play too rough. It's like Lenny from Mice and Men. Oops, I accidentally killed my human. They tried to get away and I dropped them. Then the creature feels bad that it just freaked this poor creature up. Or it just wants out of its premises. So it drops it right back where they found it, just after the searchers go home. I don't know if eating them out of hunger is a motivation, and I want to look into that more. If the captured person wakes up and wiggles away, they suddenly have to make a panic escape. This explains why their feet are often mutilated, worn down to the bone in cases. If your shoe falls off or it's ripped off you, at what point do you stop running from a 13-foot monster? You don't. The adrenaline hormones are being mainlined into their hearts, and they keep running until they become so dehydrated that they have no fluid left in their body, and they just cease to be alive. It's a rare scenario where someone could literally die of fear and exhaustion, and that's why coroners have such a difficult time with explaining the cause of death. Part 3. Strong supporting evidence, explaining the rest of the evidence. One of the greatest things David Paulides has done is create an Excel sheet of the case identifying statistics. This model could not be constructed without all these finer details. We find out that many of those who go missing are of very high intellect or of very low intellect. We think we get the low intellect. People of lower function may be more easily persuaded to comply or less likely to fight back. David has also shown how many people of high intellect, like physicians and research scientists, are very frequent for those who go missing. It's very unusual. I propose not to overthink things. Overthinking things may actually be exactly their problem. Let's say they are standing by a river. Rivers tend to be very loud, and they disguise surrounding noise. If an intellectual is looking around in an unfamiliar place, while also spacing out, they are a prime target to be taken. Everyone turns into this person when they are on their smartphone. In the very beginning of 411, David Paulides was asked by Park Service insiders to investigate these disappearances. They approached Dave to take this on because of two things. One, was full retired police. Two, he was an author, but at that time, he was only an author of the Hoopa Project, a book about witness statements of Bigfoot. They knew he believed in Bigfoot, and they picked him because he already wrote the prequel. Hoopa Project took 33 sworn, notarized affidavits who are credible people in their community, teachers, public administrators, police officers, etc. These people said they saw Bigfoot. They had very little to gain and everything to lose. As affidavits are sworn under penalty of perjury, the witnesses were able to confidently provide details if it was a male, female, young, old, fat, thin, healthy, sickly. In the Hoopa Project, the similarities that each witness independently disclosed are similar and do not contradict. Their descriptions of the beings were similar, which parts were bare versus which had hair, and how big their features were in relation to other features. All fell into a consistent pattern. Beings always seem to have had mixed intentions. I remember there was one account of a hungry, emaciated one that looked crazy-eyed, weak, and scary. In another case, one walked by, looked for a while at the observer, and kept walking. One woman wrote that it reached into an open window and reached for her, but its expression looked mildly curious, but kind of bored. There are also about 8 other affidavits who sworn they found tracks, or heard noises, or had boulders thrown at them from over 100 feet away. Dave also proved that their migration patterns were directly correlated with supplies of berry bushes by comparing patterns by overlaying the 2 pin maps. Redditor user Vortrunk pointed out that the cluster map of disappearances directly overlay the map of black bear habitats. And user BDH108 pointed out that these habitats more generally indicated that all of these areas can support very large omnivores and has the preferred means to stay covered from observers. People who go missing in the 411 books often were around berry bushes, or even stated before leaving that the intention for the hike was to go berry picking. They are the #1 group taken. One of the cases David talks about most, because he brings it up and people ask him, is the case of Dennis Martin. Shortly after Dennis Martin was abducted, investigators received an independent report from a retired couple hiking on the mountain. They saw movement even farther up the mountain and saw a large, hairy man carrying something large on its back and walking hastily up the mountain. The time of this sighting was approximately 1 hour after Dennis's disappearance. In the new Missing 411 Hunted, Dave has recorded video of a person from his camp communicating with a loud, deep, whooping voice calling them. These whoops are described numerous times in the Hoopa Project. So many reports of something banging rocks together to be scary, both in Hoopa Project and in the Missing 411 books. Many studied persons have lectured on why they believe Patterson-Gimlin film is real, including Dave. People have learned to stay away from certain areas. The areas where people go missing often have sinister names, such as Devil's Back Canyon and the Devil's Punch Bowl, and it's usually for a reason that doesn't involve anything pleasant. There was a tragedy or a history of recurring tragedy there. I could see people from prior eras very easily thinking these creatures were demons. Lastly, Dave speaks openly on his encounter when former or current park officials. Dave says that some of the insiders have admitted openly that park officials have no integrity and cover it up as much as they can. They don't have to do much manipulation or concealment. If they can't find it, they stop looking as soon as they can. They don't keep records, so they can't be asked to retrieve them for investigations. When they are asked to generate records for investigative reviews, they disincentivize him and others by asserting statutory fees or obtaining and/or copying records. There's no way around it. They really don't attempt to get control of the problem. They are lazy and incompetent, and as soon as they expand their operation to take on the issue, they start falling within the jurisdiction of the Federal Department of HS. They don't want to know because they don't want to know too much. The FBI is often at these scenes to generate a report for forward to the National Crime Information Center. One of the agents who was frequently dispatched to write these reports later committed suicide. I'm kind of just depressed and angry. I thought maybe we were brushing against the paranormal or extraterrestrial, and instead it's just some a-hole apes and an incompetent government structure that just enables it. This has been going on forever, and it's just as buried as the culture and operation of their institution. Part 4. Differential explanations. A. Teleportation, transmutation, interdimensional manipulation. Say that 5 times fast. I read Parallel Worlds and Physics of the Impossible by pop physicist Michio Kaku, Ph.D. Science does not always indicate that it is possible that an animal living on this planet has the mass energy potential to open a dimensional gateway, let alone the physiological mechanisms in their body to initiate that reaction. From the book Physics of the Impossible, Kaku says that it would take from the entire energy of the magnetic field of the Earth, concentrated in a very focused point, just to levitate a small frog. The model doesn't require this to be true, so I don't try to complicate it. It's possible that the creatures have extrasensory abilities or special sensitivity to electronic signals, such as locator beacons, and that's why people are less likely to go missing when carrying them. These national parks have large stores of potential energy, and that the telluric currents are enhanced during storms, and that people emit vibrational waves. People who are alone or give off a certain signal may stick out, even from long distances. Science has supported that several animals can sense magnetic fields. Many bird species have a protein which allows their eyes to see magnetic fields, resembling a haze, like atmosphere looks to us from an airplane window. B. Aerial craft aliens. The only beings I believe could be interdimensional are extraterrestrials or humans from the future, because I also like science fiction stories, and I'd like to think that, considering how big our universe is, that other beings exist like so many investigators believe. I think there is a lot of evidence to support the existence of aerial crafts, alien UFOs in general, but I don't see any evidence to support that is the reason for their disappearance. If aliens are smart enough to fly across space in a ship and find someone from the air to abduct, they would probably know how to put their clothes on back the right way, if they were going to do it at all. Part 5. The Connection. Explanation. These explanations for why certain people are often targeted by what seems to be particular attributes. The whole basis of my model is that these particularities exist, and they must be explained one of 2 ways, or both. 1. The Bigfoot has a preference, and is perceptive enough to pick these out. Or 2. The attribute has a strong grouping correlation with another attribute, which makes them susceptible. A. Physician connection. Lots of ER docs and hospital physicians are taken, and these docs have a high stress, long hours, and high consequential responsibilities. They have also spent many years thinking during their studies. I could see many of them finally getting the chance to relax and breathe in nature. They don't pay attention to the noises or obstructions around them, and the thing pops out and grabs them. Doctors also, unless they go to the gym, often don't have time to be in good badass shape. B. Academic connection. I think academics are even more likely to space out and not be aware of their surroundings. The fact that they are often German puts a coefficient on the likelihood, explained below. C. Military law enforcement connection. The creature can tell by the way they walk that they have a fighter's mindset. Even Homo sapiens are perceptive enough to detail, enough to tell who's down to fight. Perhaps, like in the movie Predator, they want a challenge. D. German connection. Perhaps they can distinguish the pheromones of certain national backgrounds. Another thing, and I hope I don't offend too many people, modern Germany has a very secure infrastructure. I think perhaps people visiting from Germany, or is an academic from Germany, might also have a false sense of security. I hope this doesn't offend too many people. This German connection is basically either Bigfoot is into Germans, possibly for the features commonly associated, or the way they smell. Part 6. What should be done? If everyone pressures the government to acknowledgement, they can bring this species out into the open, and they can be studied. I just think the parks don't want the liability. Just yesterday it was covered in the news that the government diverted $2 million in funds to the Park Service to be used for the July 4th celebration in D.C. This is from 2 months ago this year, so it's 2019. The parks are underfunded as it is. The sooner they fund the study of these creatures, the easier we can find ways to minimize the people who are victimized. P.S. Maybe when the park rangers shut down the remote parts of the trail because rare birds are about to mate, it's actually because they saw Bigfoot in the area. Well, my darlings, this is a popular theory. I don't know if you follow this one or not. I would like to add one little caveat that many Native American groups believe that Bigfoot is both a physical creature and one not of this dimension or world, attributed often as a spiritual creature, so that they can dimension jump. So they too may fall into the Fae theory if it goes that direction. Just saying. My apologies for any background noise. I have terrible construction problems in my neighborhood. I will probably try and mask it with other sounds, but hopefully it's not too distracting for you. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you all for coming. And special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Ermin, Darren and Jennifer, Laura, and Charlotte Emerson. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.